You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. I'm having a very good day because my Detroit Tigers advanced. Well, they didn't advance, but they won game one of the wild card round against the Houston Astros. And I am very proud of that fact. So we're going to have a good time with that. And we're going to talk a little bit about Ole Miss football and a couple of storylines that are going on and simmering. And then in the last segment, we're going to take a little bit of viewer comments and things like that. So anybody that wants to do that, go ahead and put that in the comment section and we'll get to that as well. But it's interesting because South Carolina had their media day like they are prone to do. And when they had their media day, every question that was asked to everybody seemingly was about Juice Wells. Shane Beamer had to comment on Juice Wells in his Monday press conference. All the players had to comment on Juice Wells in the press conference, which tells me one thing. The people at South Carolina care a lot, care bigly about Juice Wells. And this is going to be a cauldron that Ole Miss is walking into. It's going to be a serious deal for Ole Miss in this game. It is going to be an absolute cauldron. And what do I mean by that? I mean Knoxville 2021 level hostile environment that Ole Miss has to go play in. Arkansas, Fayetteville 2008 environment. That is what South Carolina is going to look like Saturday. And be thankful. Be absolutely thankful that you do not have to go in there at nighttime. I've gotten no less than 5 requests to go on radio stations in the Columbia area to discuss this game. I have to judge by the ones that I'm going to take by what they sound like they want to talk about. If they want to talk about the game, yes, I'll absolutely do that. But if this was all about because I had Juice Wells on the podcast back in the spring and Juice Wells made a comment about why he came to Ole Miss and that caused uproar in Carolina, I am not doing those radio interviews because that isn't fair to Juice Wells. Honestly, that isn't fair to me. And the people that are doing it are just doing it for clicks. But if you want to talk about the game, I'm more than happy to go on the radio and talk about the ball game. And that's the case. Thursday, I'm going on in Columbia for a show that they're in the pregame show. So we will see. It should be a really, really good game. But this is going to be an incredibly hostile environment because of the way that the South Carolina fans feel about Juice Wells. And for those who do not know, who do not understand what is happening and why there is such animosity in the South Carolina fan base for Juice Wells, let me give you the 411 on that. Last season, Juice Wells was a preseason All-SEC wide receiver for the South Carolina Gamecocks. Spencer Rattler was the quarterback. He had a great end of the year. South Carolina was getting ready to roll, but Juice had an injury to one of his feet that would not heal. It just wouldn't go. Now, I've heard rumors that the doctors cleared him and that Juice refused to play anyway. And I don't know. But that is the reason and the reason behind South Carolina being so anti-Juice Wells is that they think that he could play and he chose to shut it down, take their NIL money, and transfer out to go get more NIL money. That's what South Carolina fans think happened. The reality of that situation is Juice Wells had to come to Ole Miss and have surgery immediately, which means that in South Carolina, either they intentionally West Canaan Coyotes missed it, or they just didn't care, or they just made a mistake. But the fact of the matter is he was either misdiagnosed or not diagnosed when he was at South Carolina. He got to Ole Miss, had to have surgery on the foot, and after that, he's playing football at full speed in Oxford, Mississippi. But South Carolina is ticked off about that. That narrative has permeated to the point to where it has become gospel inside the state of South Carolina, and they won't hear anything else. And if judging by my comment sections in most of my videos, it's a pretty widely held belief, because anytime the name Juice Wells pops up on one of my videos, the South Carolina people come pouring in, calling him traitor and that he's a scumbag, and all of the stuff talking about why South Carolina is going to embarrass Ole Miss because of what Juice Wells did. It's weird. It's a weird situation. Now, I'm not arguing it one way or another, other than the fact that it didn't happen, but I'm not going to argue with those people because you can't convince them otherwise. That narrative is the only one that they are willing to believe. And the only narrative to them that happens is by Juice Wells being a traitor, evil person going to Ole Miss. And the only way to rectify this whole situation is by beating Ole Miss. And so the off week happened for South Carolina, talking about Ole Miss. And everybody built up this narrative. And it's getting higher and higher and stronger and stronger. And it's going to be an absolute cauldron come 2:30 Central Time on Saturday afternoon. Now, it is a good thing that Ole Miss doesn't play at nighttime. At nighttime, they would get sandstorm kicked up. It would be a problem, especially when you look at the Ole Miss offensive line dealing with the noise of that stadium. Everybody remembers what Bradley Sowell went through the last time that Ole Miss was there. But Ole Miss, in that noise, is going to have to figure out. And tomorrow, we talk about rules to succeeding in road games like this. So watch tomorrow's podcast for rules for succeeding in South Carolina. And a lot of that has to do with like the old-fashioned Nick Saban murder ball principles of 2012, 2013, that era, and kind of just moving that into the modern era of college football. That's going to be a major key in this ballgame. It's going to be a real key in this ballgame. And if Ole Miss can handle the atmosphere, handle the pressure, because there's a lot of pressure going on behind the scenes. We're going to talk about it next segment. But Ole Miss had that players-only meeting that happens every single time that a loss like that happens. The players-only meeting led by Jackson Dart happened. Ole Miss did that. So they're obviously feeling a little bit of pressure for what happened last weekend. They're going to be dealing with this environment this weekend. There's going to be a lot of stuff they have to put up with. So it means their game plan probably has to be a little bit simple. I mean, duh, right? It needs to be a little bit simple because of the noise and everything going on. They need to execute at a high level and take the defense and take the run game and just get out of there with 1-point win. Now, covering would be nice, but just win the game. Beat South Carolina, beat LSU, and you're exactly where everybody thought Ole Miss would be at the beginning of the season. But this game is as close to a must-win game without it actually being a must-win game that you can get. And that's kind of at least a little bit interesting to me. So anyway, when we come back, we are going to start talking about Jackson Dart and the players-only meeting and all of that stuff, kind of the stuff going on behind the scenes in Oxford this week. We'll talk about that. But first, it's time to highlight my Roy Player of the Week. You know, Roy is a new platform that lets fans make contributions directly to their favorite athletes. Download Roy on Android or iOS and enter the referral code Locked On. That's 2 words, Locked On. And you'll automatically be entered into a sweepstakes for $5,000 cash. There's no purchase necessary, and you can void where prohibited. This week, we have selected Suntarine Perkins because he played honestly a terrific game. He had 2 sacks, so I'm giving Suntarine Perkins $100 on Roy. If you were impressed as we were with his performance on Saturday, you can show him some love as well. Just hop onto Roy and throw him a few bucks. If everybody pitches in just $10, it will add up for Suntarine Perkins. So now you have a chance to show your appreciation for Suntarine Perkins and his standout performance this week, as well as what he'll continue to bring to the program. So get off the sidelines and into the NIL game with Roy. All right, so Ole Miss had the dreaded players-only meeting. Either way, Jackson Dart had a players-only meeting after Saturday's game, and honestly, with the way they performed offensively, they probably needed to do it. But that players-only meeting happened. And everybody talked about how Jackson Dart is taking Saturday personally, taking it kind of hard, honestly. And that's a good thing. This is somebody that means a lot. Football means a ton to Jackson Dart. And we always talk that he's the type of person that football is like 98% of the reason he's existing right now. This is a contract year. This is a money year. He's trying to make his draft money right now. And a game like Kentucky, even though he had decent numbers, he didn't have bad numbers. He threw for 260 yards and a touchdown, is not up to the standard of what he was doing in previous weeks. He still leads the nation in passing. He still leads the SEC in passing. He has the number one receiver in, I think, the country and the SEC as well on his team. He just needs to spread it out, relax a little bit. And if that happens, they're going to be fine offensively. They are. There's some really good players on Ole Miss's offensive team. There just are. I mean, everybody might want to look at this as like a doom and gloom and doom scroll and all of that on Twitter. But the reality of it is that game against Kentucky was a fluke until you proved to me it wasn't. The offense played worse than any Lane Kiffin offense has played in 5 years at Ole Miss, which tells me that's an odd occurrence. Now, Kentucky has a good defense, but the game plan just didn't work. That happens from time to time. It just didn't work. Lane Kiffin on this offense is going to get it figured out. Remember last year against Alabama, the 2023 Alabama game? Ole Miss didn't look particularly good offensively in that game as well. Alabama ended up winning the game like 24-13 or something like that, 21-13. Not much, even though everybody calls it a blowout for whatever reason. But, the offense didn't quite look right. And everybody after that game, does everybody remember what that Alabama game, the week of it afterward, was like? The whole fan base was completely losing their mind about a performance against Alabama and the offense looking so bad and what's wrong with Quinshon. And there's so many questions that honestly are very synonymous about what's going on right now. The next week, Ole Miss played LSU and put up 600 yards of offense and completely made LSU quit in that game and put up 52 points or 55 points or something like that. So we've seen literally there is a proof of concept of going from 1 week to the next week and improving and getting so much better and changing the way you do things to maximize your potential. There's proof of that. We've seen that. You saw against Penn State when you played the number one defense in the entire college football world, and Ole Miss completely took them to shreds. They had no chance of stopping that offense. There was nobody on that team that could cover Trey Harris. And Ole Miss consistently made play after play after play. You have to avoid the trap that Ole Miss fell into against Kentucky. And that was an over-reliance on downfield passing or second and third level RPOs, not enough running the football to where there's really just deep pass after deep pass after deep pass. And it gets very repetitive to the people that are watching what is going on. And that led to questions this week about how Trey Harris was being used, how Ulysses Bentley is being used, how Juice Wells is being used. Those questions became just a normal ask during the week because, Juice Wells and Jordan Watkins didn't catch a pass against Kentucky. And I understand that sometimes the game plans are doing some different things, and Trey Harris had a really good game. I think he had 10 catches or 11 catches for 160 yards and a touchdown. He was like 80% of the passing or something like that. I think it was 260 yards and he gained 160. So 2/3, I should say, of the passing yards was to Trey Harris. Caden Lee had 2 catches. Caden Priestcorn caught a Hail Mary for 42 yards, but you can't really count that because Jackson just kind of duck and chucked that. But when you look at Ole Miss offensively, they had trouble against Kentucky. And it wasn't Kentucky's doing. Kentucky's a good defense. That was more Ole Miss than Kentucky. And it wasn't Ole Miss in a way that Ole Miss was just getting beat down at a talent level. It was misexecutions, penalties, running the wrong routes, locking in on a receiver, being a foot or two off on a pass when it comes to ball placement in a way that you don't normally do it. That is one of the reasons after that Kentucky game. Now, Ole Miss cannot lose again other than Georgia. Georgia is the only game left on the schedule that Ole Miss can lose. That's the reason I call this as close to a must-win as possible without it actually being a must-win. But Ole Miss needs to defeat South Carolina. They need to go down to Tiger Stadium and defeat LSU. If that happens, they're kind of right back where we all thought they would be, and you can go into that Oklahoma game and kind of regroup and redress yourself. But if Ole Miss loses to South Carolina, if Ole Miss loses to LSU, it could be problematic because you're looking at best, likely a 9-3 type season if they get on a roll. So we'll see exactly how it goes. This football team is very good. It is the most talented football team that Ole Miss has ever assembled. They had an whoopsie moment against Kentucky that nobody wanted to see. But, I mean, that's the truth of what's happening. You had a situation against Kentucky that Ole Miss could only lose that game one way, and that was them playing at an unbelievably poor level and Kentucky playing a nearly perfect game. And it still required a fumbled quarterback run fumble into the end zone that was recovered by a tight end. Everything looked well. A couple of plays got made. There was a couple of one-on-ones that Ole Miss lost at very costly times. If you look at it, there's a better chance that Kentucky game was a fluke than not. So we'll see. The South Carolina game has a chance to be very, very difficult for Ole Miss. Very difficult. And we'll see if Ole Miss can survive that cauldron. Again, win by 1 point and then get ready and go down to LSU. And you're going to play an LSU team that's going to be very confident against you as well. So you'll see. You've got to fight the next 2 weeks playing games on the road. But if you can pick up wins in both of those games, I think you're going to be in pretty good shape. All right, thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. When we come back, we are going to start taking the comments from the chat. If anybody has anything interesting to say, we'll just kind of have a conversation back and forth as well. So stick around for that. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. It is the place to bet on which side of Ole Miss being a 9.5-point favorite for Saturday's game against South Carolina. With the over-under right now, it's set at 52.5 points. You know, Ole Miss would have gone at about that number by themselves in previous games this season. So when you get a hunch like that in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, the latest play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. All right, so we're going to spend the last 12 minutes or so on the show in the chat room and kind of taking your questions and your thoughts and all of that and getting your opinion on what's going on. We were going to have Brad Logan on the show at the last second. He had to cancel tonight, so it kind of opened up this segment as well. So we'll see what's up. Rebs by 100. Did you see Michael Pettis' Instagram story? He had Bentley's picture with a broken chain emojis. Listen, I do not understand what's happening with Ulysses Bentley. If anything is happening with Ulysses Bentley, I will admit totally it's weird, but I did see that story that you were referring to. And I do think that Ulysses Bentley needs to be featured a little bit more. Remember, in 2023, he did not do much in September. And in October, he got really good to the point where Ole Miss won games because of him. I'm not 100% sure about it, but yes, I did see that. Michael Specs, why are we such a big favorite? Because we have a better football team than South Carolina. If you just look talent for talent, player for player, Ole Miss has a better football team than South Carolina. Does that mean that Ole Miss is going to win? No, I don't know. I mean, underdogs win all the time. Look at Kentucky last week. Anything can happen in a football game. But if you're going to look at probabilities I think Ole Miss is about an 80% probability favorite over South Carolina right now. Rick Hornsby, I was at Tennessee in 21, and it was deafening when on offense. It'll be similar Saturday. Yes. Saturday's going to be a mess, okay? It is. Do not be surprised with what happens. I don't think people realize what this Juice Wells situation has done to South Carolina. And them being ready to, in their own minds, like I said, this is in their own minds, to let Juice know how displeased they are with him. And Ole Miss is going to face a lot of that wrath because they're going to be there to get it out on Juice. It is going to be imperative for Ole Miss to get off to a quick start in this game. It will be absolutely imperative to do that. And when I talked to Chris Marler from Locked On Gamecocks, we're going to see exactly how that goes. But it should be really interesting. Tennessee was deafening in 21. And Arkansas in 2008 that I was talking about, that was the one that, like, Chuck Rounsaville almost got arrested on the field after the game because Arkansas fans tried to fight him. That was a weird, very dirty game. Do the players-only meetings work? Well, I asked Tim Tebow. His did. Players-only meetings work when they work. Notable competition. Gee, I honestly hope that the players-only meeting helps us get a win. I think it might. I mean, it shows that leadership is doing something, to get it done. I don't think there was finger pointing in the meeting, anything like that. I think it was more of a situation where the leaders just talked. It wasn't something where Lane Kiffin was in the room. It was JJ Pegues. It was Jackson Dart. Those dudes saying what they think needs to happen. I think this was a very, very healthy thing, but it does happen every single time. Every single time. Best thing about the Rebels is no need for Roy. That's not true. Roy's awesome. Roy's the great. I give $100 to Roy after every game to the player of the week. DB never had a loss hurt so bad. Really? Now that one hurt a little bit because it was unexpected, but to me, just my opinion, that loss was nowhere near 2015 Arkansas. Nowhere near that. It wasn't anywhere near 2003 LSU. And not to mention the games that just got weird to where, like, Arkansas State and all them are up on you in the ball game. I think those games were a little bit worse. It's a must win. Stop reading the fanboy stuff. No, it's not a must win. What I said is it's as close to a must win as it can get without being an actual must win. If Ole Miss loses the game, they will still be mathematically eligible to move forward and do all of the stuff that they need to do. Therefore, it is not a must win. Literally, it is not a must win. But if they lose this game, Georgia is still on the schedule. You have to beat Georgia. You have to win at LSU. That looks unlikely. So like I said, it's as close to a must win as it can get without actually being a must win. They look sluggish. I wonder if they partied for homecoming. That I don't know. No. Revs by 100. Who scores the first TD? Well, I mean, if you look at Ole Miss's offense right now, you would say Trey Harris. But I think Henry Parrish has a chance to do it, and I'd like to see if Ulysses Bentley gets on the field playing the ball as well. Is Weiss the answer at OC? I do not play this game, Mark Walsh. Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss take equal blame and equal responsibility for when it goes well. So it isn't, I'm never going to do a situation that when the offense looks bad, I blame Charlie Weiss, and when the offense looks good, I praise Lane Kiffin. I don't want to do that. It's not fair to Charlie Weiss. But Charlie Weiss and Lane Kiffin has the iPad on the sideline. He has the play sheet on the sideline. He has the ability to talk to the quarterback in the middle of the play to where when he starts talking, Charlie Weiss gets quiet. So this is at least a collaboration, and they watch film and they figure out what's going to happen in the game plan. Charlie Weiss is on the staff and doing all that because he has a photographic memory. He can understand what coverages and how they reacted to it and things like that, because he's really beneficial for Lane Kiffin shot plays. That's why Charlie Weiss does that. I do think Ole Miss will be fine and get it going. How do you see playoff chances stand after this weekend? If Ole Miss wins, Ole Miss is fine. If Ole Miss loses, they're not going to the playoff. Period. Who's a better team, Kentucky or South Carolina? I'm calling South Carolina. I think they're about the same. South Carolina is a little bit better offensively. Kentucky's a little bit better defensively. South Carolina is optimistic or opportunistic, but they're not good offensively. They would be like 11th or 12th in the SEC offensively when Kentucky was like 15th. South Carolina had 215 yards and 13 first downs against Kentucky. They won the game because they were opportunistic and had the ball in plus territory most of the game. They won the field position battle. It's not that South Carolina was better. It went wrong for Kentucky. That is how that goes. We need to get up 14 or 17 points from Rick Hornsby and quick and take the crowd out of the game. I absolutely agree on that. It cannot, if it goes down to the fourth quarter and South Carolina is able to get confidence and all of that, and the crowd is ramped up, that is going to be a long fourth quarter. Ole Miss needs a fast start in this game. How do you feel about Ole Miss's secondary? Fine. Ole Miss got beat on that 4th and 7 that the guy pushed off, Barry and Brown pushed off. That's inexcusable. They're getting too many penalties at the moment, and we'll see if they finally address that, because they didn't over the last couple of weeks. But Trey Amos is fine. They're just a little handsy at the moment. They're in position to make the play. That's the important part. They're there. It's not like you're seeing people running wide ass open. So they're going to be fine. They just need to cut out the penalties that keep drives alive. If Ole Miss just doesn't do drive-saving penalties on defense, Kentucky doesn't even go for that 4th and 7, because that was all a duck and chuck, hoping that Isaiah Hamilton commits pass interference. That was just a penalty drawing play. They just happened to complete it. Same thing was happening all over the field, and they're developing a reputation. Ole Miss has to get that cleaned up, especially on the road going to South Carolina and going to LSU. Now, I'm not saying that. The defense is hurting because of those penalties. Front seven's really good. They're leading the SEC in sacks right now. They're one of the top 5 teams in the country for tackles for loss. But the secondary does have to be less handsy. Becky says, would you say you have the best wife ever? And the answer to that is abso-freaking-lutely, because she can sit there and do things on my podcast and moderate the chat room while I'm doing this. And how many wives would do that? That's fantastic. She's the best. She is absolutely the best. Rick Hornsby, do you hear about their edge rushers as being good, but do they have any stud receivers? Their edge rushers are really good. They have, I think Kyle Kennard has 5.5 sacks this season. And then they have Dylan Stewart, who is the true freshman 5-star player, who is really good. So it's going to be imperative on Ole Miss to get that defensive line moving. This might be a perfect game to bring back the jet sweep, to use the outside zone play, to get outside the pocket, to make those defensive linemen move side to side, that with the tempo, you're going to be able to put yourself at an advantage. But stud receivers wise, they have good receivers, not great receivers. They have one guy that's really, really fast. I don't know if he's good though. Pass rush with the best D-line money can buy. South Carolina's D-line's good, but it's not great. Kind of to you, I'm kind of disappointed in our front seven. We lead the SEC in sacks and we lead the SEC in tackles for loss. I mean, it kind of is what it is. Joe says, will you shout out my daughter? She's watching with me and never misses an episode. Her name is Sadie Inward. Hello, Sadie. Thank you so much for watching the show. I have a good time doing it. I hope you have a good time watching it. And thank you so much for doing that. And tell Joe I got his back too. So we're going to shut this down real quick. Hope everybody enjoys the game. We have essentially, let's see, I need to cut off the comment. We have a sold out game in South Carolina, in Columbia, South Carolina on Saturday, 2:30 p.m. Central Time, ESPN. It should be a very good game. If Ole Miss allows it to get weird, it will get weird. South Carolina is good enough to beat you if you allow them to get in it. But if Ole Miss plays well, they're going to win the football game. Ole Miss is favored by 9.5 points. It should be a lot of fun. I'm going to get off and celebrate my Tigers beating the Houston Astros in game 1. And I'm going to get ready for the SEC squad video recording that I'm doing in about 30 minutes. So everybody take care. We will talk to you later. Hotty toddy, y'all.